Reluctant Preppers provides educational awareness and commentary only. Opinions expressed do not constitute personalized financial advice. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and seek qualified personal financial consultation before making investment decisions. Hey, Reluctant Preppers, if you haven't heard, we've already started our monthly 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle thank you gift to one active Patreon subscriber each month, signed by your host, Dunagun Kaiser. And you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
RTD Live Talk, 9:30 p.m. Wednesday, the 14th day of the month of November. We are live, and so doing it from the old Google Hangout way of things because the other method is not working. But more importantly, I have a special guest with me, or with us rather, Mr. Dunagun Kaiser from ReluctantPreppers.com. He's joining us to share his thoughts on what it means to be prepared. And so since he has a very popular YouTube channel, I thought what better way to have a guest who actually studies what it means to be prepared for the days ahead, given that there's so many things happening around us. And so I'm going to go right to the screen. Dunagun, welcome to RTD Live Talk.
Thanks, Mike, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. And so, as always, I want to make sure we give it a second for more people to join us tonight so we can have some participation in this chat, because it's all about getting the people's voice, letting them be heard via audio or via chat. So as always, if you guys want, 833-LIVE-RTD is the toll-free number you can call to ask questions directly, or just to, let us know what's on your mind. And so I want to start off first off, Dunagun. I keep wanting to kind of dunk it. I apologize for that. I want to start off with the first question. Reluctant Preppers. How, why, and where did the idea of Reluctant Preppers come about? And give us an insight into what the whole preparation side of that is all about.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. First, I wanted to give you credit for having a fallback plan. When your primary technology of Skype didn't work, you tried another one, and when that didn't work, you tried a third one. So here we are in Google Hangouts. So I just wanted to point out one of the rules of preparedness is that 1 is none and 2 is 1. So if you only have one way of doing something, you might as well figure you don't have it, because if anything goes wrong, you're out of luck. But you had a fallback plan, and I got to give you credit for that, because that's just something we should all remember. Is everybody knows it's good to have a plan A, but what's your plan B? So good for you.
Good point. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So how I got into this, it's actually somewhat interesting. I have we did homeschooling with all of our 5 children, and I had a child who, from the youngest age, was really interested in money. And I mean, who isn't interested in money? But he was really interested in money, to the point where, like, when I would carry him on my hip over to the kindergarten to drop off his older brother at kindergarten. After that, then we homeschooled them all. But anyway, and he saw that they had a toy cash register in the kindergarten room, and he would go rearrange and straighten out all their money. So all the ones were the ones, and the fives were the fives, and the quarters were the quarters, and everything like that. I mean, he was that into it, and he started having selling stuff in the front curb stands, lemonade stands, popcorn stands, candy stands, that kind of stuff. And he started asking all these questions. He always would have money and be making money and saving money, and finally he came to me one day and he said, "Dad, where does money come from?" And I explained to him what I knew about where money came from. He said, "I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to me, Dad. I need to understand better." So I thought, okay, I got this all figured out. I'm going to have him start talking to, like, our local bank manager and a local investment broker and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And also I told him, as a homeschool parent, hey, why don't you go do the research and make up a report, and then we'll look at it. So he looked up what he could find in the encyclopedia and online, and they went to the Federal Reserve. They call the money store on the federalreserve.com and stuff. And he came back to me after about way longer than he usually would do a research report. And he says, "Dad, it's just not making any sense. Yeah. Can you look through what I'm finding out and see if it makes any sense to you?" So I thought, oh, sure. I'm sure there's just some misunderstanding. So we looked at it together, and I thought, no, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand this either. So we started digging into it more, and pretty soon he ran out of people in our town that he could interview because nobody could really get him down. They were starting to tell him the same stories over again. It still wasn't making sense of where money comes from, who creates it, how does it get its value, and how do they decide who to give it to after they create it? How does that fare? And he started interviewing people all over the country and all over the world. And finally, he interviewed some pretty big names on the independent media. And he actually got to go speak at 2 national conferences as a 16-year-old on the topic of both independent learning at homeschooling, as well as understanding the risks and the sort of the dark untold story of where our currency comes from. Yeah. So that kind of got me into feeling quite concerned about protecting from risks of loss of value of our savings, for example. And we got burned also in the .com bubble collapse of our 401k. And then again, in 2008, we actually had, trying to be on the safe side, we had asked our brokerage firm where could we get better interest rate on our money, and they said, well, you could get this money market reserve fund, they called it. And so we said, okay, great, one day access to your fund. So we put all of the cash that was just sitting there not doing anything into that. And 2008 collapse happened, and Lehman Brothers is no more. And we got this letter in the mail saying, you're not going to get access to your funds until further notice. And we said, what? We're supposed to have one day access to our funds. And we were staying out of the stock market so that we could be safe. Right. And they said, yeah, actually that fund, the reserve fund, was actually invested in Lehman Brothers on the backside. And so that's collaterally damaged, and we don't have your money, and you just got to wait. Your whole account is frozen. And it went on for months and months and months, actually for years. Actually, we've never gotten all of our money back. It finally got to 50% and then like 70% and 90%, but we've never gotten it all back. And once a year, they call me up and ask me what they can do for me, and I tell them, give me my money back. So those were some pain points and some revelations that really got my eyes open to, well, where can you put your savings so that it's not going to get just evaporated or taken away from you? Yeah. And we also had a police officer, actually, no, he was the county sheriff, came to my place of employment and gave us a sort of a public service talk for about an hour about how to reduce risk in your life, about safety at home, safety when you're out shopping, safety, different aspects of that. And one of the things he said is, the only thing I can tell you is we're not going to be there when you need us. And I thought, well, that's an interesting pronouncement, because usually when people say, oh, don't worry, we got you covered, the more sure they seem to be, the less confident I feel. But when this guy came out just a real straight shooter and said, we can give you guidelines, we can give you principles, but in a large sense, you're going to be on your own as far as protecting some of the stuff. You have to take these precautionary measures to take prudent precautions. It's just many of these little things, experiences added up to make me start to be concerned that we were into challenging times. And then when I saw some of the more research that my son, who didn't give up, he just kept doing more and more research, and he started sharing some of his interviews that he had done with some of these experts with me. And both my wife and myself just decided, well, forget this. We're not going to keep our savings where we have in the past, or even any of the places we have in the past. And it really got us questioning the stability of the US dollar. It got us questioning the robustness of ordinary savings accounts and checking accounts and things like that, and realized that I know, as you've said on your channel, and when we've spoken with you as well, it's important to not put your savings out where they're out of reach and where they're in some kind of system where it can be taken away from you. Yeah. But we also live in a suburban area where there's these deed restrictions that we got handed the packet at our closing on our house, like, hey, you bought the house, here's the rules that come with it. So we looked in there, it's like, oh, you can't have a garden, okay, you can't have a above ground swimming pool, you can't have this and you can't have that, and realized, wait a minute, if we can't have a garden. My parents grew up in the World War II, and they thought a victory garden, everybody's got to have a garden. So I was taught to garden, and that was a fallback. We have friends that had, chickens in the backyard and that kind of stuff. So now we realized we felt very vulnerable, that our food supply, and we couldn't have like a big reservoir of water close at hand, that kind of thing. And thought, jeepers. And we've had a couple of situations where either the electricity's gone out, or other interruptions like that, and we go, okay, with no electricity, we have no heat for our house because we have electric fan on our furnace, and the furnace blower the burner won't even kick in if it's not satisfied. All these interlocks in there, it's got to have power. So we started worrying about that. Not that we were worried really all the time, but just realizing we have no plan B. It gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning. We had no plan B for heat or for food or for water. And in fact, there was a snowstorm that came to our town, and we thought, well, we better get some stock up on some groceries because it might be kind of tough to get out for a few days. We went to our favorite large supermarket style, a big supermarket, and the shelves were almost bare, and there was armed police officer by the door, which is not at all, I mean, maybe where somebody lives, you guys that are listening to this, that's normal to have an armed police officer by the door of the grocery store. It was not for us at all. We never saw anything like that. Yeah. And the place had been cleaned out, and we thought, good to know that by the time you feel like you need something, you're not going to be able to get it. So that really got the wheels turning for us, and we just started taking what we felt were common sense, reasonable steps to try to bolster our security and preparedness of our family situation for food, for water, for heat, for light, for those kind of things. So, and there's lots more to tell, but that's just how we got some few little hard knocks and some cautionary experiences got us concerned that we really needed to have a plan B.
Yeah. Now on your channel, once again, we're streaming live with Dunagun Kaiser from ReluctantPreppers.com. And so the whole title, for you guys, you can see this, is all about being prepared and what does it mean to be prepared. And so on your channel, you cover, monetary, health. I might have seen a little bit of spirituality type of things in there. So what are some of the total aspects of preparedness would you say will be important outside of that, the obvious, you name some of the things that got you into this. Now, having interviewed all the people you've interviewed, what have you learned and what preparations have you made outside of what you already know?
Okay, so there's two big questions there. I think one is, what are some important types of preparedness? Mm-hmm. And another one is, what specific things what steps have we taken?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to show one thing that I think will help answer a lot about what a lot of types of preparedness are. Actually, this doesn't show all the types, but it shows several. And this is actually a present that my son gave me after a while. He gave me this book, and this is by Dr. Arthur T. Bradley, who we had on our channel a couple of times. And this is actually an older edition of his book of Handbook of Preparedness. Yeah. And then for a later Christmas, he gave me this one, Disaster Preparedness for the Family, also by Dr. Arthur T. Bradley. It's a later edition. So in here, and these are I can highly recommend these guys. I don't sell them or anything, but you can get them anywhere. And Dr. Bradley in there talks about like 14 different aspects of preparedness. And that might be something just to really quickly glance at, because he kind of does a quick rundown for you. He talks about, he goes just by chapter. Chapter 1, staying alive.
Food,
chapter 2, food, water, shelter, light, electrical power, heating, cooling, air, sleep, first aid, communication, financial preparedness, transportation. Goes on, protection, special needs, creating a disaster preparedness network, and then trial by fire, or actually, doing some dry runs and testing your plan. So he really goes in here. If you think about it, for those people who've studied like psychology or child development or whatever, there's that model that psychologist Maslow came up with, the Maslow hierarchy, where you've got basically you've got to have safety first, because if you don't feel safe, you're not even going to eat or drink. Usually you're going to run first, and then when you feel safe, then you're going to eat and drink. And sleep eventually within a couple of days becomes a big deal. And air obviously, but then you start working your way up. And you mentioned one of the things that we learned when talking with a lot of people about this was something that's one of my weakest points. I see this over and over in different parts of my life, is over-reliance on myself. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people keep stressing, have a network of good friends and associates and people that in your community, in your friends, people you can count on, people you trust. And it helps if these people have skills. I know Chris Dwayne talks about having people with real skills and real friends, real assets. But if you know people who do garden, or people who raise chickens or animals of any kind that are food producing, or if you know people who can repair things, and learn how to do repairs yourself. See, that's something that I was blessed with. Was both my parents came through the Great Depression and grew up in lower middle class families or upper lower class families, I guess, and they had to do almost everything for themselves. So they taught, in addition to learning how to garden, I learned how to repair just about anything. That's the old joke is, the wife sees something that looks just like a piece of junk by the side of the road, and she says, "Oh, go pick that up. Your father can fix it." So I mean, my sons joked that the one mower I had repaired so many times they called it Franken mower. So anyway, that just kind of having those skills is another form of preparedness, and some real basic tools and things like that you can repair things with. But then you keep going beyond this sort of social, cultural, and you do. That's part of Maslow's hierarchy too, is transcendence and spiritual preparedness. And a lot of people, if you look at the comments that are under a lot of the videos, almost every video interview that we've posted on Reluctant Preppers, where we're talking about sort of practical, material, logistical type options, one or two or three commenters will add a comment about realizing that this world is not our final destination. This is the purpose of our being here, is not just to make ourselves fat and comfortable and live forever, because we're not going to live forever here. This is not our final place. This is not our real home. It's the place we're here to learn to expand the capacity of our spirit and our soul to love and to self-sacrifice. And myself, being a Christian, I do follow the ultimate leadership model of Jesus Christ as a self-sacrificing leader. So that's an area that I know was a life lesson for me throughout becoming married, for example, and then having children and now having grandchildren, is that idea that you actually grow up by sacrificing yourself and by surrendering. And often that means going through discomfort, and often that means going through difficulty for the good of another, whether that's physical, losing sleep to be up with a feverish child, or whether that means giving up your pride in an argument with your spouse to be the one to just let it go, or whether that means spiritually sacrificing by loving someone who is treating you unkindly, or that sort of thing. Yeah. So anyway, just that in hard times to come, the point that they remind us of, a lot of these people, is that you can have all the physical preparations you want, but none of us is going to get out of here alive, and none of us is going to get out of here with more than we brought into this world physically. We all came in, naked and hungry, and we're all going to leave without anything.
Yeah.
But it's how much has our soul grown in its ability, its capacity to love and to give meaning to life by sacrificing for others, that will take with us when our life here is done. So that's a perspective. Because to wrap it all up, I guess you asked me in the beginning, how do you get prepared? And I thought, okay, I'll just have this list and check off this list, and then I'll be in good shape. And the more, over these past 4.5 years that I've talked with more and more people, the more I've realized none of us can really say with full confidence that we're prepared for whatever eventualities. I mean, you can prepare for one thing and something else will happen. People say, hey, move to the safest place. So you start searching where all the hazards are. And some people say, oh, the safest place is right out in the Rocky Mountains area out there in the west, because low population density and there's no typhoons and all that stuff. Well, then you're right on top of the Yellowstone caldera that's set to blow, and it's going to take out the whole half the continent with it when it goes. So, right now, and we've got loved ones in California, and they've got the wildfires going there, and we've got other loved ones over in the Middle East, and there's, routine flare-ups of violence and that sort of thing. So you can run, but you can't hide from life. Things can happen, and we just try to find ways to just at least try to be responsible, try to be an adult, and try to take some care. But one thing that my son reminds me, the same son who got me into this in the first place, with his love of talking about where does real value of money and everything come from, is he reminds me that you got to take time for gratitude and take time for joy too. So my wife and I have just recently been reminding each other of that. Is if you spend your whole life worrying, the crazy thing is you've already given up your happiness if you're worrying all the time. So don't surrender. That's like unilaterally surrendering. Don't do that. Just try to think intelligently about what might be the most likely things that could cause unnecessary disruption to your family. Try to take some reasonable precautions around that, but then also remember to have fun, to laugh, to make music, to do silly things, to spend time together as a family.
Enjoy it, yeah. Now, let's move on a little further now. So for those that might be tuning in, I have Dunagun Kaiser from ReluctantPreppers.com, and the primary subject matter is what does it mean to be prepared? And so I want to actually get into, what are we preparing for? Given the fact you hinted that you can never really be prepared. So what are we preparing for? Because you held up 2 big, thick books that cover 14 different aspects of a professional who says that we need to be prepared for something. So what exactly are we preparing for? And give us your thoughts based upon, you've interviewed several dozen, if not maybe 100 or so different people from all types of worlds. What are some things that you've learned that you should be preparing for right now?
Okay, so first of all, it's another one of those non-answers, and that is nobody really knows.
Yeah.
They really don't. Although that's where the spiritual people will come back and say, yeah, we do. We know we should be preparing for the fact that we're not going to be alive forever. And when our earthly life ends, are we going to be spiritually prepared for what comes next? And emotionally, that can help us along the way between now and then as well. But from a physical standpoint, there's one of the most easy answers is, depending where you live, what are the most severe weather events, just the natural disasters that tend to happen around where you are? Mm-hmm. Are you in a flood area? Are you in a tornado area? Are you in an earthquake area? Are you in a place where there's severe lightning storms? Are you in a place where they get severe ice storms that can break the power lines and you can lose power? What are the high winds, that kind of thing? Shoot, when we lived in Minnesota, we didn't have that many tornadoes. We had straight line winds that took down most of the trees in the town we lived in. So anyway, that's the first easy answer, is just think of it from a natural standpoint. What are the most likely natural severe weather events that could happen where you are? Mm-hmm. And then there's specific countermeasures you can take to mitigate, to reduce your risk of a severe impact from those kinds of specific natural disasters. Then the next one that a lot of people, you've noticed on our channel, and the reason I think we had you on was because a lot of people are concerned about financial risk. Our lives have become so much dependent on buying things, because unlike my parents, who grew up in poor families in the Depression era, where they had a big garden and a cow for milk and that kind of stuff, most people these days are utterly dependent. Most of us and our neighbors and our friends are almost entirely dependent on buying our food and other things that we need, ways of heating our home and so on. So that's another big financial concern, is that with our national debt and national debts around the world having reached just unprecedented proportions, and the amount of risk with derivative exposure that all the major central banks and all the investment firms and everything have built up, just like we got stung when there was the 2008 collapse from subprime mortgage lending or something that unwound and started this whole house of cards. We weren't involved in that at all. We had our money tucked away in a cash equivalent one-day access money market savings fund, and it didn't matter. When the system comes down, you don't get access to your fund. So that's one of the things that's pretty realistic, that within, and everybody can argue about whether it's weeks, months, years, or a decade or two, whatever, but it's pretty unrealistic in many people's view that we've talked with, to think that we can just keep this unlimited debt thing ballooning, and it really is exponentially increasing. And you guys have talked about probably the last, during the Obama presidency, the debt, he had more debt than all the previous presidents since the beginning of our country, and now Trump's on the track to do the same. And if that keeps happening, it just goes to where there will come a time when confidence is lost, and there are some large players that don't want to be the last one to leave the casino. And once they've decided that they're going to get out, it's way too late for you to start taking any countermeasures. So that's one of the things that is reasonable to prepare for, is in some measure, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but in some measure, you should reduce your risk to a serious interruption in your ability to use the the normal way that you transact with currency and ATM machines and all that kind of thing. That's reasonable to prepare for. You said, what else are we preparing for? Some people are quite concerned about electromagnetic pulse or EMP, whether it is artificially created by a hostile force or friendly fire. Depends how much you want to go down all these different channels of reasoning, or whether it's potentially another factor of nature. There's coronal mass ejections, CMEs from the sun every so often, and they can knock out. And our world has become undeniably, compared to like the cowboy days when everybody had even if there was a sunspot event, you could go out and you could fire up your tractor because your tractor was a couple of oxen that could pull your plow and it was still going to work. But now we're so utterly dependent on microelectronics and long electrical grid and everything like that. Our homes, everything's got smart appliances, and we're just totally plugged in. So what happens when all that might get disabled naturally or unnaturally? So how realistic is that a concern? How likely is it between 0% and 100% that we're going to experience that in our lifetime? I don't know, but that's one of the things that Dr. Arthur Bradley is a specialist in, and he's got some specific recommendations around that. So one thing more I just wanted to say that's a really wholesome way to look at this is we visited a charming hardware store. Actually, I first got this catalog in the mail from Layman's Hardware, and I wish I had it here. Anyway, it was the Layman's Non-Electric Catalog, LEHMANS. And if you look up Layman's.com, it's a hardware store where everything they sell is non-electric, and you would be amazed how many things you can do without needing electricity. And anyway, we visited their store finally in Kidron, Ohio, and got to meet the daughter of the founder. We met the founder himself, and then later we interviewed them. So we've got a lot of interviews, and we kept going on topics of how do I get heat when the furnace is out? How do I get light when the electricity is out? How do I get water when the tap won't run? And on and on. Mm-hmm. Lots of really helpful interviews with them to get you thinking about sort of traditional methods that are still perfectly useful to prepare for disruption in any of those things that we're used to having just at our fingertips.
Yeah. Now, let me ask your thoughts, because you hinted at the fact that everybody's plugged in, this whole society, and, my kids are a little bit younger, but all they've known is technology at their fingertips. And so if there's some type of event where they're automatically disconnected because of electricity or whatever, how do you think life will be restarting over, where a majority of the population do not know how to provide for themselves in any form or fashion because we are provided for? Do you think it'll be a simple educational process to get back to using our hands again, or will it be complete nightmare because we don't know where to begin?
I'm really concerned it'll be closer to the latter of those examples. First of all, any place where there's a high population density in big cities and that kind of thing, you end up with hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who perhaps have never provided food for themselves, that sort of thing, or have those skills and were never taught that stuff. And people get hungry, and there can be a lot of stress and a lot of determined people who are willing to do just about anything to try to meet their basic needs. Mm-hmm. And so that could be an unsafe situation for a period of time. So trying to, and I don't know if anybody's been to the, there's a website called the Organic Prepper with Daisy Luther. She's a blogger about that. And she talks about, even when you're trying to do this intentionally and in a period of calm, like, oh, I'm going to start a garden and I'm going to feed myself out of my garden or whatever, all kinds of things can go wrong. Like you can get too much rain and it rots the roots, or getting too little rain and your crops die, or you get great crops and all the rabbits and deer come in and eat them all up, and on and on and on. Or you have this great, you're raising a goat to get milk and it gets run out and it's on the highway and now you don't have a goat anymore. And so there's hard lessons. And also Full Spectrum Survival, Brad Harris from there, if you go to fullspectrumsurvival.com, he'll talk about all kinds of practicing and dry runs that you should be doing with your family, whether it's camping, so you learn outdoor skills, or whether it's trying some like survival weekends or some orienteering and that kind of things. We've had a number of different guests on who have really talked about the importance of practicing those skills, because it's really too late to learn once the urgency. Now, if you have months of food or water stored up, then you might have a chance, depending what season of the year it is. I mean, if there's a major disruption in our society and our electrical grid or our whatever financial lives, and it's wintertime, not a good time to start gardening in most places in North America in the middle of winter, that kind of thing. So you really got to think those things through and decide. And this is another thing that's tough. How far do you take this? How much of your life energy do you let this take, and how much of your spare time and everything and your money? So we try to find a sort of what we think is a balance. Everybody's got to find their balance point that they're comfortable with. And you can always fault yourself for not having done enough, or maybe having done too much, and you should, gee, maybe I should have taken it a little bit easier and spent some more time doing some fun stuff, whatever it was. You got to find that balance point that's going to work for you, and you think is responsible and prudent and reasonable to take some precautions in those most vulnerable areas.
Yeah, fair enough there. Now, as we draw towards the end of our conversation, I want to get your thoughts on some of your most recent videos, because you've had a lot of great guests on Reluctant Preppers. And so I noticed like Gregory Manarinos, Rob Kirby, Lynette Zane, and a lot of great people who offer very detailed ways of describing how things are unfolding in our monetary system. What are some things that you've probably been able to put together from listening to all those voices out there that you yourself can say, I'm pretty confident that ABC might be happening soon, or something of that nature? Because you get a chance to learn a lot from all these voices. What would you want to share with the audience in regards to what is coming based upon all the information you've gathered?
That's a really good question. I would say, from having talked to several people with differing perspectives, I feel more aware of how much there is yet to learn. So I feel, I guess, painfully aware of how little I do know, and realizing that I certainly can't, and they don't either. When I ask those guests, I mean, these people have been studying this pretty much their entire professional lives, and they won't let you pin them down and say, yeah, it's going to happen next month, or it's going to happen next year, or whatever, as far as a major collapse. But one of the things that I think is consistent across what most of our guests have said is that the official narrative, the official story that you're going to hear on the corporate media, and most people call it mainstream media, but we're starting to call it corporate media, because so much of it is corporate owned by fewer and fewer hands, and it really has a strong profit motive that it has to uphold. So the message is not free to really give you the real scoop. So anyway, that's what you're going to hear officially is not going to be the most reliable about what's really going on in the economy. And so you're going to be usually told that that the economy is stronger than it really is, or that there's more reason by looking at this. Like they'll say, look at the stock market as long as the stock market's going up, that means the economy is strong and you should be relaxed and confident and keep putting your earnings in there. But I think that's one of the most important things that I feel that I've heard from lots of these expert guests, and that is that you've got to look deeper than that surface story that you're being told, and realize that when you really look at it, I could just start down the list, but the principle is that things are not as rosy as they're being made out to be. So you probably would be prudent to start from that assumption and start making preparations as though things aren't as stable and as robust as they're made out to be. And I could give lots of specific examples of that, but that's the basic principle I think is the most strong consensus I've had from my guests.
All right. So I want to get to some questions, and it looks like we might have a caller. And so I'm trying to answer the call, but yet for whatever reason, it's not working properly. But there's a question in the chat, and it says, it's from Edward, and it says, I have a family of 4. It says, should I aim to have 1 silver monster box per family member in order to be prepared for what's coming? And so it looks like his question is in reference to silver. And of course, there's no exact amount, but, based upon that question there, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one way to think about that, and I agree, there is no one right answer for that. And there's 2 problems with trying to answer flat out like that. One is that if you just forget about silver for a minute, pretend that the financial world was going to be stable, then if I asked you how many dollars should you have stored up per family member to be in good shape, given anything else that might happen, natural disasters, etc., what would that answer be? And everybody's got to answer that on their own. If you listen to people like I'm trying to remember the guy Dave Ramsey of the Financial Peace Institute, or others, or we've had Jerry Robinson from followthemoney.com on our channel. And most people who are in that kind of a role say, look, you've got to start with some savings. So at least start with shoot for a month, and then shoot for 2 months worth, and then shoot for 6 months worth, and see if you can get up to a year, or at least to 6 months. So think about how much money do you spend to support your family in a month, and then what would 3 months, what would 6 months look like? And if you had that saved up, how much would that add up to? So that if there was a major, let's just say you got really injured or something, or really sick or something, and you couldn't do whatever you're doing right now to provide an income, and if you don't have enough disability insurance or whatever, can your family tide out? Can you get through a tough time like that? Loss of a job, that kind of thing. I should have mentioned that earlier. That's another thing to prepare for. But or heaven forbid, if there was a major flood or tornado or some kind of disruption or economic one, do you have enough to get through a month or 2 months or 6 months? That's a good gauge to ask yourself. And there's no perfect length of time. But then the reason that people start talking about silver is because if they're concerned about an economic hard time that involves loss of confidence in the dollar or loss of value in the dollar, then it wouldn't be dollars necessarily that you'd want to be saving up. So what can you save up that would hold that value and have it not be dependent on the dollar being useful at that time? And that's where things like physical precious metals, gold and silver, come in handy, because they tend to hold their value more or less, regardless of where you are in the world or what the economic situation is. So if you translate today, if you take, that's the other thing, is some people can live very frugally. When we talked with Brad Harris from Full Spectrum Survival, he and his wife and their child, they live in a very small cabin on a little patch of land, and they have a little garden, a little greenhouse, that kind of thing. They live on very little cash, so they would not need as much to support their lifestyle. So that also depends what kind of a expense habit are you trying to support. So
Dunagun, want to cut you off? Sorry to cut you off. We got a caller. And so, hello, caller. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, this is Jeff from Florida. How you doing today, Mike?
Doing good, Jeff from Florida. What's your question? What's your thought for this evening?
Hey, I just had a quick question. I was reading over an article on Zero Hedge, and I really like your guest. I've watched many of his videos on YouTube, but I just wanted his input. According to this article I was reading, and it was saying 62% of all U.S. jobs do not currently pay enough to support a middle-class lifestyle. And then it goes on to say 58% of all Americans have less than $1,000 in savings for an emergency. And then it goes on to say in the article, it says more than half of all U.S. children are receiving financial assistance from the federal government. So under these, these circumstances that we're in as a country, what advice would your guest have for a normal person working their 9-to-5 job that can't even rub two nickels together to even put $1,000 aside for a rainy day? Like, what other preparations should we be making?
Jeff, good point there, Jeff. Appreciate that call.
Yeah,
thank you. All right.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for that. And what you're describing is, again, what puts the lie to the official narrative that we have this robust economy and it's so strong and everything's going fine. It's like, oh, really? If that's so true, then how come people are actually struggling to maintain a lifestyle that isn't necessarily even as good as their parents enjoyed? That's a very good point. One thing to remember about jobs, not, you mentioned a little more than half of the jobs not paying enough to support a family, that sort of thing. Remember that not everybody's job is for that purpose. I mean, you have new people that are, new earners out of high school or whatever that are just learning the trade or that kind of thing. You also have some retirees that choose to just keep busy or something. So not every job is necessarily appropriate to think that you can, because that's a criticism. People have said, if you get a job at a fast food restaurant, you can't support a family. Well, maybe that's not the place you should be setting your target at as far as what what contribution you can make to society. But low savings, that's a real problem, because that's partly what we're talking about, is people don't have, like, if people are just skating from on the skin of their teeth and have no savings, then you've got no reserves. And there's lots of kinds of reserves. You talked about the plight of children. That's a big deal, and one of the things that has gone on for the past, ever since, well, a long time, but especially since the Great Society of our president after Nixon here, where he was talking about we're going to have to make it, Lyndon Johnson and before. Since then, thinking that we need to create this sort of this subsidized world in which people get all their needs taken care of, and it still persists today with people thinking of universal basic income and everything. It's just a way of really making it to where they're not really supporting the integrity of families. So if we've got to reinforce the strength and the importance of families providing for each other and staying together and working at that. But having all that being said, you said, what can you do if you don't have two nickels to rub together? So everything else, like building up your skills so you know how to repair things, doing gardening, making friends who raise food and that sort of thing, finding ways to do things, odd jobs for your neighbors, and then they help you out so you build a strong network in your community. There's so many ways. Learn. If you go to fullspectrumsurvival.com, you'll see so many ways of what they call bushcraft and outdoor skills, how to catch food in the wild, how to cook things without fuel, all this kind of stuff. So there's so many ways that you can improve your preparedness by learning skills and by forming friendships with people who you do things for each other that will help you a lot. And none of that takes money. So that's one idea.
Good point there. So obviously it just takes time and the willingness to want to learn something new. And so any type of skills where you're using your hands will definitely pay off, because worst case scenario, if you can't actually provide for yourself, perhaps you can barter some of that skill off to someone else.
Absolutely.
And, that's the whole idea of community. And so once again, it's been great having a guest, Dunagun Kaiser from ReluctantPreppers.com. Definitely is a great subject matter to really get into, because one thing I realized being a part of the younger generation, I myself have no true hands-on skills other than just learning on the fly. And so one of the things that I believe that will be a benefit for the youth is the fact that when things get rough and our backs are against the wall, we're going to be forced to have to come out swinging and learn new skills to survive. And so I think that's when the whole idea of everybody, turn on their creative genius will come into play. So hopefully that is the case, but we'll see. But Dunagun, any last thoughts you want to leave us with here on RTD Live Talk?
Well, just in the spirit of what you were just saying, is to open yourself up to learning new things. But I would encourage people, seriously, don't wait until, don't have your plan A be, I'm going to wait until things look really, really bad, and then I'm going to start trying to learn stuff I need to learn. It's like, why not just start now? Make a hobby out of it. Try a few different things. I mean, heck, we started growing. We couldn't do gardening in our homeowners association, so instead we put all these huge pots out on our back deck and started growing all kinds of vegetables out of pots, because it's not a garden, it's just potted plants. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things like that. You could go on, if you start brainstorming, you can come up with, and there's a lot of ideas in these books too, and on some of these websites. And with our guest Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms we've had on, he gives you all kinds of ideas of things you can do now on very little money that will give you practice starting to try your hand at doing some of these things. Don't wait. Do not have your plan A be that you're going to wait till a disaster to start getting ready for the disaster. It's not a good time to wait.
All right. I do agree. Well, everybody, it's been great tuning in tonight. Thanks for all the participation via chat and the call we had tonight. So once again, once I get my format back up and running, it'll be a little stream. It'll stream a little easier to where we can see each other and see the stream and chat and things of that nature. But in the meantime, we make do what we have. So I'm thankful once again, Dunagun, for you joining us. And also for those that want to follow you, Reluctant Preppers is a YouTube channel. Anywhere else you want to direct people to stay in tune with some of your articles and videos and things of that nature?
We have a sister channel, healingyourself.life. So if they either go to healingyourself.life, the website, or on YouTube, you can go to Healing Yourself channel, and you'll see additional interviews with all kinds of different doctors, herbalists, people talking about things you're not hearing about. We have a former FDA researcher who's talking about things you're not hearing from the official sources about how to maintain your family's health and wellness and well-being.
Well, fair enough. Well, everybody, be good, be safe. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and I will see you guys later on another RTD Live Talk. Once again, thanks to my guests for joining us. Everybody have a good night, and I'll see you guys later.